The day an HOA president showed up on my porch with a clipboard and told me construction on my land started Monday, I knew one of us had lost their mind, and it wasn't me. She stood there clicking a pen like she was timing my obedience, white Escalade humming in the driveway, smile so tight it looked painful. No hello? No explanation, just sign here, Mr. Wolfson. My name is Garrett Wolfson. I'm 58. I've got 40 years of diesel grease worked into my hands, and I own 34 acres on the western edge of Calderwood Pines, Texas. My grandfather cleared that land in 1951. My father ran cattle on it until he died, and I inherited it clean, no mortgage, no liens, no easements. Just an old deed and 4 iron survey pins still sitting where my grandfather drove them. That land was there long before Calderwood Pines and its HOA. I never bought one of their lots, never signed their CCRs, never joined their HOA. I was private ranch land surrounded by deed-restricted suburbia, and that worked just fine until Dorinda Yancey became board president. Dorinda treated the HOA like a throne. Former real estate paralegal, always acting like a stamped paper, was the same thing as the law. A few weeks before the porch visit, she'd already told me the low southeastern corner of my property was a drainage easement belonging to the community. She handed me a document covered in stamps. I looked at it for 4 seconds, handed it back, and told her my deed included that section with 0 easements attached. She smiled like I was being cute. 3 weeks later, 2 excavators rolled onto that same corner at 7 in the morning. The diesel rumble hit first. Then came the orange stakes, the work trucks, and the foreman with the plans spread across his hood. His name was Bryce Polite, just a working man doing his job. He showed me the permit, pointed to the plans, said they were building a community pool along easement area 7C. Did anybody pull the actual deed on this parcel before y'all broke ground? He blinked once and said, that's not really my department. I went back to the house, poured coffee hot enough to strip paint, and called my cousin Harland, who spent 40 years in title records. 20 minutes later, he called back and said, buddy, they built on your land. Full stop. The permit application had a transposed parcel number 2 digits switched. Tiny typo, huge problem. On paper, it moved the line 90 feet enough to push the project off HOA land and onto mine. The permit was void. The equipment was trespassing. Some people would have gone down there yelling. I get it. But 40 years fixing engines taught me not to start tearing things apart before I document what failed. So I got methodical. I borrowed a trail camera from my neighbor Cliff and aimed it at the site. I walked the fence line with my phone recording every stake tire track and torn patch of soil. Then I went to the barn, pulled the fireproof lockbox from under my workbench, and opened up that smell of old paper and motor oil, which to me smells like family. Inside was my grandfather's deed, my father's probate file, and a 1962 survey with my grandfather's initials E.W. marked beside the southeast corner. I sent Dorinda a certified letter, calm and factual, telling her construction had begun on my private property without consent and demanding an immediate stop. 3 days later, the HOA's attorney sent me 8 pages claiming my land was subject to an implied easement because rainwater had historically drained through that corner. I read it twice and laughed once because apparently I'd reached the stage where they were trying to steal my land with legal poetry. That's when I called Vera Ashcraft. Vera was the kind of lawyer who made people regret underestimating quiet women. Small, sharp old pickup voice so calm it got mean. She reviewed everything in 48 hours and said Garrett, their easement theory would be funny if it weren't attached to so much stupidity. Her response was brutal. She demanded every board minute, every email, every permit record, every internal communication about the pool. Litigation hold. In plain English, don't shred a thing. By June, Dorinda was smiling for the HOA newsletter in front of blue-green water in a cedar pergola. 2 weeks later, they sent me a bill. They built a $200,000 pool on my property, then mailed me an assessment for maintenance as an adjacent owner benefiting from community infrastructure. I read that line 3 times, forwarded it to Vera, and she called back fast. Do you know what the sentence right before the one they quoted says, she asked? I didn't. Written consent of the adjacent parcel owner. Your signature, which they never got. Garrett, this isn't just wrong. It's fraudulent. Instead of backing off, Dorinda made me the villain. She fed the neighborhood Facebook group a story about the difficult rancher next door trying to shut down the community pool out of spite. No mention the pool was on my land. No mention the fake parcel number. No mention the bill. Then she called the county on my cattle operation, hoping an inspector at my gate would shake me up. Instead, they sent Dale Strunk, an old county officer who could smell a nuisance complaint from the road. He walked the property, checked the cattle, looked over the water lines, and wrote full compliance in his report. Before he left, he said, "Calls like this usually tell me more about the caller than the property." Vera started pulling county records on her own. First thing she found was an email from Dorinda to the HOA's surveyor 6 weeks before the permit filing. Vera read it to me slow and flat. "We need that southeast corner included. If we pull the pins and restake it, the drainage argument should hold." Pull the pins. My grandfather's iron pins. The ones that had marked that boundary for decades. Somebody had yanked them out of my ground and moved the line to fit the story they wanted to tell. That was the moment this stopped feeling like petty HOA nonsense and started feeling like fraud. A former board member named Carol Finn, who had voted against the pool and resigned soon after, invited Vera and me to her kitchen table. She slid a manila folder across to us and said, "I've been waiting for somebody with standing to sue." Inside was the whole rotten spine of the thing. An HOA amendment expanding board authority had been recorded without the required member vote. That illegal amendment was the basis for the service area nonsense they'd used against me. Behind that was a purchase agreement letting a holding company buy the pool below market value once it was built. The registered agent for that company, Dorinda Yancey. I finally saw the whole machine. She had engineered the whole thing, pushed through an illegal amendment, restake stolen land, build the pool with HOA money bill, me then position herself to buy the finished asset cheap. The neighborhood thought they were funding a community pool. They were really financing Dorinda's side deal. After that, everything moved fast. Vera made the criminal referral. Quiet title got filed. The surveyor cooperated when he realized his license was hanging by a thread. A reporter dug into the public records and turned Dorinda's little smear campaign into a much bigger story. And while all that moved through courtrooms and county files, I made my own plan. So once it became clear the court was going to confirm what the deed already said, I called Cliff, my old friend with the pump truck. We worked it out at my kitchen table. When the ruling came, he'd drain every gallon out of that pool, leave the shell dry, then help me bolt a livestock waterer into the shallow end and plumb it to my well line. A pool built on stolen ranch land was about to become the fanciest cattle trough in Kerr County. The hearing came on a Tuesday morning in late April. Courtroom packed. Dorinda sat there in a burgundy blazer, looking very still. Vera laid it all out, the deed chain, the false permit, the moved pins, the illegal amendment, the email, the purchase agreement. At 12:17 p.m., Judge Doris Wafer ruled from the bench. No valid easement, void permit, illegal amendment, clear title in my name, including every improvement on that parcel, which meant the $200,000 pool belonged to me. Nobody cheered. But that whole courtroom exhaled at once, and sometimes justice doesn't sound like applause. Sometimes it sounds like people finally breathing again. By 2 o'clock, Cliff had the pump truck backed onto the pool deck. The hoses dropped and the diesel engine kicked up, and 21,000 gallons of water started leaving that pool, one hard-working growl at a time. Residents gathered along the fence. Dorinda was nowhere in sight. The next morning, Cliff and I installed the livestock waterer in the shallow end. I opened the gate and walked 6 Herefords through. They lowered their heads and drank like that pool had always belonged to cattle. By that afternoon, the photo was everywhere, 6 cows standing in what used to be the Calderwood Pines Community Aquatic Center. No caption needed. 2 weeks later, Dorinda got removed from the board. Charges followed. The developer paid. The surveyor lost his license. The HOA clawed money back. And me, I kept the shell right where it was. One October weekend, I poured a fresh strip of concrete along the coping and pressed in boot prints and hoof prints before it set. Up in the corner, I stamped my grandfather's initials, EW. Same land, same message. That's the part that stayed with me. Dorinda thought power lived in titles, legal threats, public opinion, and fancy letterhead. But land doesn't care about any of that. Records don't care. Time doesn't care. My grandfather left me proof, and he left me the patience not to panic while somebody louder tried to bury me in paper. Sometimes the lesson comes late. Sometimes you don't realize it until you're standing there watching cattle drink out of a stolen swimming pool. Greed always reaches one step too far. It always mistakes quiet for weakness. And it always eventually runs into somebody who knows exactly what's theirs. So tell me this: when somebody uses rules, paperwork, and fake authority to take what isn't theirs, what counts as justice? Is getting it back enough? Or does real karma need an audience? Drop your state and your story in the comments and tell me where you draw the line between justice and revenge, because I know I'm not the only one who's watched power get real loud right before it falls apart.